Hey, welcome to the newest episode of the Articulate Ox podcast. I am your host, Soma79. Thank you so much for joining me today. I love this episode. My guest, Therese Shechter, we talk about her movie, My So-Called Selfish Life. This movie really struck a chord with me. It's a documentary she made about her decision not to have children. And I myself, as a nearing 45-year-old person, and I don't have kids myself, it is something I've thought a lot about over the course of my life. And her movie does a pretty good job of summing up a lot of the reasons why I decided not to have kids. So I related a lot to Teresa. She mentions a few other documentaries that she made during the interview that I am dying to go check out. So I'm going to go do that. One thing I can say about My So-Called Selfish Life is that it sounds like a heavy topic, and at points it is during the documentary, but this documentary really scratches a lot of itches. Like, it's both a joyful watch, there's humor in there, there's some pop culture stuff, but there's a lot of stuff that really strikes the heart, a lot of stuff that really strikes the mind, and I think it's excellent. Like, so if you're thinking that maybe this documentary might be too much for you, I'm sure it probably isn't. And it's a very joyful, interesting, thought-provoking watch, and it strikes a really great tone. Teresa did a great job on this documentary, and I cannot wait to see what she does next. So I hope you enjoy it. Go check it out. It is available to stream online for a rental price, and it is totally worth your time. So thank you very much, Teresa. I really appreciate having you here, and hope to have you back on sometime when you have another project to talk about. And just mention Soma79, me. I got some music out there. Go check it out. It's on Spotify. I have a video out for my song, These Trees Have Eyes with Pillsy Beats. That is floating around out there. So go check that out. I have some new music on the way with Anthony Church. We have a new album coming out later this year called Zero for the Day. Another album with Pillsy Beats called You're Scaring the Ducks. And then I will be dropping a single with Esoteric from Czarface and Cool Keith and Aztec from Hybrid Thoughts called Doomsday for a Man of Steel. That is coming this summer. I am working on the music video for it now. I was actually talking to Esoteric about it the other day, so I'm very excited to share that with everybody. So thank you very much. I hope y'all are having a great day. Hope you enjoy this interview with Teresa. Check out her movie. Check out all of her movies. Check out everything she's about because she's awesome. All right, I'll talk to you soon. Peace. Hey, welcome to the newest episode of the Articulate Ox podcast. I am your host, Soma79. Thank you so much for joining me. Today, I am super excited for my guest, Therese Shechter, not the host, the filmmaker behind My So-Called Selfish Life, which is a documentary about your choice not to have children. And this is something, as a 45-year-old person with no children myself, I have a lot of opinions on this as well. So how are you doing today, Teresa?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you very much.
And hello to your
Um,
cat on your lap.
Oh, thank you. Yep, Chloe right here. It's interesting. So the reason I reached out to you is so I always believe there's a lot of people like in my periphery that are kind of doing interesting things, no matter of finding them. And I think I told you this a few months ago. I was just going through my nightstand and I happened to find this card. I have no idea where it came from. I have a tendency not to throw things away just for reasons like this. And I found this and I read it, and it was funny. It was just at a time where I'd spent a week with my parents, and it was one of the first times in my life I ever second guessed my decision to have kids. So finding this at that time, and that second guessing has now worn off. So it's but finding this felt very interesting at the time. So how are you doing today, Teresa? And talk a little about your film.
Sure. So, do you have kids?
I don't. I have zero
Okay.
kids. No.
So you were second guessing whether you should have had kids. Is that
Yeah, there was a moment when my mom and I went to this record store just to get some records, and there was a guy there with two little kids, and they were so cute. And having this, it was just they were so well behaved and so cute, and it kind of hit me in a way. And like I went back after and I talked to my ex who has a kid. You know, if I were to have had a kid, I probably would have been with her. And I told her that story, and she's like, "The thing you're missing is almost certainly that guy was there with that kids because his wife told him to get all of them out of the house." I was like, that means a lot coming from you. So
Yeah. I mean, sometimes I see this like really smart, cool 14-year-old girl, and I think, that would be cool having a daughter like that. And then I'm like, yes, but what about
right.
like the 14 years leading up to that. So in the
Yeah.
next, 50 years. So yeah, I understand having those feelings, and if I think about it for a minute, it definitely kind of is like, no, no, you don't. Yeah. So
But it's not about wanting a kid for that moment. It's about wanting for a kid like in almost every moment.
yeah.
It's like, and that's where it's like, I don't know a lot of people think that through.
Um, it's it's really surprising how, and I'm going to generalize here, obviously, because everyone is different, but it is
Mhm.
surprising how little thought goes into whether or not to have kids for many people, because it's just sort of expected. It's something you're supposed to do. Um, you grow up, as I did, thinking, well, everyone has kids. Everyone's supposed to have kids. And, then maybe you're not really paying attention to your birth control, or just something happens and you're pregnant, and okay, well, let's have this kid, which that's a huge undertaking to
No.
not really think through in detail that when you might want that to happen, if at all. So, but I can tell you a little bit about the film if you want.
Mhm.
So so I'm a documentary filmmaker. This is my third feature length documentary, like full length documentary, my so-called selfish life. And I'm basically interested in the concept of reproductive freedom, which means whether you want children or not, you want to be able to make that decision about when, if, and how many. That I think is a fundamental right that people should have. So I'm looking at this idea of reproductive freedom through this lens of people who choose not to have children, as a way to talk about those concepts. So that's something I hadn't really seen ever, looking at that subject through that lens. And as someone who pretty much never wanted children, it was something I'd been thinking about for a really long time. And I got to a point where I thought, okay, I'm ready to make a film about this, um, and then I did. So
One great point that your film raises, which I guess is kind of obvious, but I hadn't really thought of it this way, probably because of when I was born, is that reproductive freedom has only really existed for a short period of time. Like when you think about just like the billions of years that we've been on the planet, before it was abstinence, and then it was like, I don't know, it wasn't until last century that there actually were good ways to prevent reproduction if you wanted to still have sex. And so this is a relatively, in the concept of humankind, a relatively new concept.
somewhat, yeah. I mean, I will say that for millennia, women have been trying to control their own fertility.
Right.
So it's not something that just people started thinking about doing that. I
Right.
mean,
I guess actually be able to do it effectively
yeah,
and whatever, consistently.
yeah, exactly, exactly. So as we talk about in the film, there are many, many ways of trying to control your fertility that women have taken advantage of. Um, but with the development of the pill, it was sort of the first really reliable, almost entirely effective way to do it. And it really changed a lot. And I will say that the pill is great for some people, not so great for other people. The early formulations of the pill were really not that safe, honestly. However, safer than childbirth. So yeah, it made a huge, huge difference. I think it was, do I have my number? It was legalized in the US in the 60s, first for married couples, and then I think in 72, if I can remember my own film, 72 for single people. Um, and it gave women suddenly a vast amount of control over their lives and their futures. Um, and a lot of people really did not did not like that.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of really interesting backlash to that. Now we have safe, reliable IUDs also, which have made a really big difference as well. When I was younger, the IUDs were not that safe. So it seems like these things start off, there's such a need for it. People really want it. It's not quite as safe as it should be, but eventually it becomes safer. so yeah, it's an essential thing to be able to control that and make your own decisions. And I mean, unfortunately, the US is now going backwards. Um,
It
Abortion
makes
became
you
legal.
wonder how far backwards it can go because it's pretty scary. I mean, I saw something this morning about a North Carolina Republican who some comments he made 4 years ago in front of a packed room about how he doesn't want women to vote anymore. And like this was not that long ago, and it's like these people could be back in charge. It's absolutely insane. It's insane. Like you talk about the backlash to contraception. The logic in that doesn't hold up beyond one question. There's really no argument towards it that doesn't involve religion, which to me is not really an argument when it comes to contraception. So it's so bizarre to see like that arguments and truth and facts and science are nothing compared to just random stuff pulled out of the air and brain and out of I don't even know where.
Yeah, I mean, I think right now with abortion being illegal in half the country, more or less,
Right. Or
um,
effectively illegal. Yeah.
I just read that there were 60 some thousand women who had been forced to give birth after being raped.
Yeah.
So just sit with that number. I think it was like 68,000. I don't remember exactly.
Some of them by family members too.
Oh,
That's
very
another
often.
thing that like, especially when we talk about, I don't speak in generalities here. A lot of those states have decent rates of family members and,
I
whatever.
mean,
It's
I think that kids are um, much less safe in their own homes than they are out on the street when it
exactly.
comes to things like sexual abuse. So, yeah, um, and so that's really shocking and sobering. And the next step is to make contraception also illegal or inaccessible. And yeah, why do we even have the vote? I mean, we should just vote the way our husbands suggest. Why?
It's
Why? I think like part of it is I think that the religion is used very often as a reason because this is what God wants. Well, God never talked about it actually. So,
right.
there so this is what God wants. But I think underneath it all is just a desire for control,
Yeah.
being able to control other people.
Well,
And
just look
that
at how non-serious they take the seven deadly sins in general. I mean, is that like, I mean, pride. People forget that pride is not just a sin, but a deadly sin. And I would assume that would include pride of your country and pride of, and then gluttony, don't get me started. I mean, lust, like, these are just off the top. I
yeah.
mean, and it's like, those are ones that, I mean, there are people I know in my life, I could point to them and go, yeah, you 3 out of 7, 4 out of 7, our former president, 7 out of 7, like
I mean, I think,
maybe 8.
we could have a really long conversation about the hypocrisy behind all of these conversations, like complete hypocrisy. Um, but anyway, yeah, I think this is about control. It's about white people controlling everybody else. It's about men controlling every other gender. It's about rich people controlling everybody else. There is this constant need to exert control over others, and this is something that's been with us a long time, and we think it's getting better, and we think society is getting fairer, more open, but I don't know. It's backsliding right now, and that's a real problem, and it's a problem for women's health, children's health. Actually, there's this correlation between the states where abortion is illegal and the lack of support for mothers and children.
Yeah.
It's like a very direct link that like the states that want to force women to have babies are the states that give the absolute worst support for women and babies. So you've got to like
Right.
wonder what is behind this, because it's not like they care about.
Right. Well, to quote George Carlin from many years ago, he said Republicans want live babies to raise to be dead soldiers. And I think that there's that's obviously George Carlin, but there's some truth to that, I think.
Well, it's really interesting that you mentioned that, because the big thing in researching this film which started with really just hearing people's stories about the pressure they felt to have children and the world they lived in where they didn't see any representation of not, making the choice not to have children and things like that. The more research I did on the film, the more I understood a social system called pronatalism, which now that you've seen the film, you're well versed in pronatalism.
Yep, it's in my vocab now.
Yeah, it's in your vocabulary. And it's not a word we use much. It's not a word that everybody knows, but it is like capitalism and patriarchy and other social systems. Pronatalism is the pressure or the, it translates from the Latin as for birth. So on the most basic level, it's being for birth, but it's a lot more complex than that. But it really speaks to the pressure on people and especially women to reproduce. And why? Because we need more soldiers, we need more consumers, we need more, taxpayers, and the more sinister side of that is we need all of these people because we don't want immigrants.
Right.
And there's this fear that we're running out of white people. So we need white people to have more children. This is all,
and that's interesting.
Yeah.
That's interesting too, because it made me think of something that I thought about watching your movie. Is that there was some, I forget who it was, but certain politicians or whoever, public speakers, were talking about how basically that we need more people, we need more babies, more people having kids. What doesn't get talked about is the high infant mortality rate in this country. And it's like, that's something that in a lot of that affects people of color, people of minorities. It's like, you want to have more kids. That's a real solvable problem, is let's have less of them die unnecessarily during birth. But there's not a whole lot of interest in solving that problem because it doesn't bring more white kids, essentially.
There's a real white supremacist part of this whole conversation about pronatalism that doesn't get said. Except sometimes people say the quiet thing out loud, and they do say it, which is getting more and more kind of blatant. And
it is, and they realize that their backlash isn't that bad, and they're not even scared to say the quiet thing quiet anymore, which is really scary.
Right. I love that expression, by the way. I was thinking about it. Like it's a relatively very new expression.
Yeah.
I just love it, saying the quiet thing out loud.
I remember the first time I heard that was in The Simpsons. I don't know if that's where it came from, but that's the first time I heard it. Was Krusty said it when he was judging a film festival that he was paid off to judge.
What did he say?
He was like he was paid to vote for something certain, and he goes, "This film really moved me to a better tax bracket." And he goes, "Oh, I said the quiet part loud and the loud part." So that might have been the start of it, or maybe they took it from somewhere. But
I'm happy to give The Simpsons credit for that.
Yeah.
But yeah, now I'm thinking about The Simpsons and I've lost the thread. Go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, just the point about the high mortality rates and how that's not something that they seem to really want to fix. It's right. Because healthcare is a disaster in this country.
It is, and the maternal mortality rate is astonishingly high for the developed world. For a country which has everything it needs. It's shocking that so many women die, and disproportionately Black women, women of color, Indigenous women. They are disproportionately dying. So it's sort of complicated and it's sort of simple, sort of at the same time. But this idea of pronatalism really informed the whole film. And so we were looking at pronatalism from just like commercials where pregnancy test commercials. This is one of my favorite examples. If you've ever seen pregnancy test commercials, this is changing like this much right now.
I finally saw one that, yeah.
Yeah. They never show anyone happy not to be pregnant. Like that they just don't.
Blows my mind.
I've seen two now where someone does seem happy not to be pregnant, but even then there's this whole thing about like, well, for now, I'm not, right. But maybe later. So never seeing any pregnancy test commercials where people are happy not to be pregnant. And I really, really believe that a lot of people taking pregnancy tests really do not want to be pregnant.
Everybody I know that's taken one.
Yeah, exactly. I certainly have done it. And yeah, and some people, of course, very much want to be pregnant, but to never show the other side of it is really, really an interesting decision.
Well, it speaks to what you're saying before about how you didn't really see people without children, is that, growing up, and, I was similarly, mostly because the people I knew were people I knew from school and friends of them and stuff like that. But like, there is a certain belief that, and this is something I'm concerned about as a non-binary person, that like, there's a bit of trying to erase people that don't fit into this stereotype out of public life. Whereas, by not showing them in commercials, by, just saying that, by pushing them to the side, by being mad every time that Bud Light decides they're going to have this person endorse them instead of this person. It's all an argument about being like, we need these people out of, the public spotlight. And the same thing with the mortality rates is because it happens mostly to minorities, it doesn't get put in the public eye as much. So it makes it easy for these people to just turn their eye and be like, Jesus will save you. Don't need to see the stats.
Yeah, and even when and of course everything that's going on with LGBTQ plus people, just
Scary.
trying to erasing trans people,
Yeah,
they just don't exist. That kind of stuff is pretty horrifying.
it is. Yeah.
And it's real and it's happening. But even like on TV shows, for a long time, when you saw people who weren't the mainstream, a lot of times they just weren't portrayed in their full humanity.
They were played as a joke.
It was a joke, or for women without children, they were most often portrayed as bitter or sad or bitchy, or like something, there's something wrong with them. Clearly,
Yeah.
something is wrong. It was unusual to see someone who didn't have children and was perfectly happy with it.
Right.
That is slowly changing also. We have some people in the film, like the doctor in Grey's Anatomy, played by Sandra Oh, and I'm blanking on her character's name, but Sandra Oh's character, who has an abortion in Grey's Anatomy, and it breaks up her marriage because she just doesn't want children. That stuff is getting a little bit better. That kind of representation of people who know what they want, are happy, and that's it. So again, it's a kind of control. Like, if you don't see it, you don't know it exists, kind of thing.
Right.
If all you ever see is one kind of way of depicting somebody, then that's what you think it is.
Yeah.
And so anyway, yeah, so it's interesting. It's really interesting.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you'd made two other films, and I also want to talk about this a little before I forget. You mentioned this card that I don't have my glasses on, but is a documentary in progress. So I want to ask exactly what that's all about, because I thought that was I've been working on this film myself for a few years, and
Yeah.
I'm like, once I read that, I'm like, maybe that's how I market mine. So what is that about? What prompted you to make the decision to advertise it that way at the time?
Oh,
And how old is this by you?
Yeah, it's old. Your card says documentary in progress.
Yeah.
Wow.
I don't
Well,
throw anything out.
I will say this. No, that's cool. They don't say in progress anymore, obviously. But the film was finished in 2021. I started working on it in 2016.
This thing's been in my nightstand for that long?
No, I mean, it could have been any time before 2021.
But that's still like 3 or 4 years ago. I'm more remarking on myself. Sorry.
It takes a long time to make a documentary,
Yeah.
especially an independent documentary,
Mhm.
especially an independent documentary about, sort of feminist issues and about
Right.
women's lives. Everything makes it like a longer process. And a lot of it has to do with fundraising. So, there'd be fundraising. We would use that money to work on the film, and then we'd have to fundraise again and use the money to work on the film. So that the card was, in a lot of ways, we're making this film. It's in progress. If you're really excited about seeing this film out in the world, we could really use your support. kind of thing. So that's why the card says in progress, because it's something that's going to exist. But we usually say that for people to know that maybe they can support it in some way. There's a point where you say, I want everyone to know I'm making this film.
Right.
You don't want
It also helps you get more people, I'm sure, involved, because it's like, you don't want all the people after going, oh, you should have talked to this person, should have talked to that person. I mean, this helps you,
That's true.
get
And
to those people.
actually, one really important thing, at least for me, is starting to build an audience from day one. So as soon as I had a title for the film, I started, this is in 2016, created the Facebook page, created the Instagram account, created, all of Twitter, whatever, and started building an audience. I think Facebook came first. And so it was really important because, people were really looking for spaces online where they could talk about this stuff, talk about not wanting kids without any sort of shame or judgment, but also talk about the pressures they were feeling, or talk about some stupid thing that was in the news or whatever, celebrate someone famous who didn't want kids and is sort of speaking supportively of that. So it's been in progress since the day I started that Facebook page, I guess, basically. And you grow the audience and bring the audience along with you. And when we finished it, and then we're finally able to we did a global streaming premiere, which was for about 2 or 3 weeks. I think it was available globally to stream. The response was massive because there were so many people that had been waiting for this film to come out. So it was this crazy successful.
That's such a smart idea.
Launch.
Yeah. I mean, I'm right now thinking about how I can apply that to what I'm working on, but I'll think about that more. That's such a smart idea because, as independent, I'm more of a musician and I'm a writer and stuff like that. You spend all this time on something, but if that's all done in private, and then if you're not, huge name, it can just come out with a thud, and then it's really hard to build momentum when something is out there and it hasn't already done something. So that is a really brilliant technique of just kind of putting the work as part of the process and letting people get involved. I mean, that's excellent. That's such a cool idea. Is that something that you come up with yourself? Is that something you've done in the past, or is this did you see it done somewhere?
I've done it to a certain extent. But social media wasn't what it was when I first didn't exist, basically, when I started making films. But I think that's something that people do more and more, especially as an independent filmmaker. I don't have any marketing budget. I don't have a studio behind me. I don't have anything, So the free promotion that we can do, but also the free audience building that we can do on social media, for example, is really, really important. And I think, honestly, Marvel kind of does the same thing. Like Marvel will give you, 10 seconds of Hercules, at the end of, I don't remember which movie it was.
I'm ashamed to say I know that it's the Eternals.
The Eternals. Okay. I saw the Eternals. And then you see Hercules at the end. And wait, no, was it? Or was it?
Actually, I'm second guessing that now. The Eternals. Oh, wait a minute. No, because Thor, wasn't the end of Thor the one with Harry Styles? Or maybe that was the end of the Eternals.
Oh.
Yeah, the end of the Eternals was Harry Styles and Patton Oswalt as Chip the Troll. God,
this was the most recent Thor movie, which had Zeus in it.
You're right. Because the end of the Marvels was something different that I won't ruin it because a lot of people haven't seen that. It's based on the box office. Actually. I loved it. Don't believe the box office. It was because of the writer's strike. It failed.
I would love to see it. I just haven't yet. Yeah,
Kamala Khan is my favorite character. She's like my little beating heart. I think she's amazing.
Okay. Well, I'll put it at the top of the list now. I've been trying to keep up with the Oscar things, but so you see Hercules and it's Brett Goldstein, which is completely awesome. And you're like, oh my God, they're going to be making the Hercules movie, so they sort of do the same thing, right? Because now that they've put that out there, they can start doing all of this audience building for Hercules,
right. And their masters are giving you just enough, but not too much. And I think that's something that's important too. They're so good at not giving everything away, just getting your appetite wet, Yeah,
for sure. Now, I don't have a lot in common with Marvel, studios.
Yeah, I don't
Honestly,
like that stuff either.
I mean, I don't. You know,
I'm literally
our
getting a
budgets are
Captain
little
America
different.
tattoo tomorrow.
Is that Cap back? Yeah.
That's Cap back there. But I'm getting a
Uh,
tattoo of when he holds Thor's hammer because that was the greatest movie in a moment in a movie theater ever, and it
yeah,
happened right on my 40th birthday. So I'm getting that tattooed tomorrow
that's
on my leg
amazing.
inside my Wu-Tang
That
symbol.
was a great moment. Was that at the
Yeah.
end of
Endgame.
Endgame? Yeah, it was at the end of Endgame. Yeah, I cried through that whole battle sequence.
I had a lot of tears in that movie.
Yeah.
Not
Anyway,
ashamed to
so
admit it.
I know, no, it's true. We could spend the rest of the time completely geeking out about Marvel, but oh,
Talk about how bad Rocket Raccoon makes me rethink my entire life after watching Guardians 3. I wasn't right for. I remember when Guardians 3 came on, my girlfriend was still like texting as the movie starting to roll and not really paying much attention. And she looks up, the credits aren't done yet. I'm already crying, and she has no idea what's going. I'm like, oh man, glad she loves me for me.
that's nice. Yeah. So I think the idea of sort of teasing out a film way, 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 way before it gets done is a thing, although I think independent filmmakers will do it for different reasons.
Yeah.
And yeah, I do think, especially when you have a film about some sort of social issue that people will have an emotional connection to or response to, that's really, it's easier to do that than if you're making a film about, I don't know. I was going to say the history of cheese, but I would have a very emotional connection to
Well,
anything.
here's a good example. I had some people on a few months ago who they were premiering a documentary called Sticker Movie, and it was all about the culture of putting stickers on things. And
Mhm.
it's like, I was just thinking about, as you're talking about, how different it is that to be preparing a film that like Sticker Movie, it's pretty hard to piss people off with stickers. It's like,
Mhm.
there's not a whole lot of controversy there. But
Yeah.
like when you're making a movie that you kind of know baked into it is going to have some nasty backlash to it, is that something to prepare for? And when did it occur that way, or was it not as bad as you thought, or maybe not as bad as I think it would be?
It wasn't as I thought it would be. Um, I made a film about virginity, like virginity culture, and the
I'm
mythology.
very interested in your other two films now too, because I should have
Yeah,
done my homework and realized that
we
because
can
I'm
we can
this was
we can
so
talk
well
about that.
made.
Thank you very much. Yeah, we can talk about that. But that one got a lot of backlash from conservative uh, journalists and like the thing is, and that's fine. I sort of expect that.
It's like, how do you hate both virginity and people who don't want to have kids?
I mean, there's no logic to any of this. No, they love virginity. No, they just, I probably could have thought about the title a little more than I did because it's called How to
What
Lose
was
Virginity.
How to Lose Your Virginity? That's a good title, though. I mean, that's the title of my movie I'm making is Drinking Songs for Children, and so a good title I think can help.
Yeah, that's good. That is good. Yeah, I think part of it was so I got a lot of pushback on that by people who I'm almost 100% sure never watched the film because
Okay. I don't need to watch that. I know what it's about.
yeah, I mean the film is doesn't really take a side on
No,
whether
it doesn't.
so there are a
It's
lot of
very fair.
it is, and there are a lot of interesting stories. Like some of the characters in there are people who have decided to wait until they're married before they have any kind of sex, and they tell their own stories and talk about their own lives. And there's no real judgment there. It's like the film judges um, people who won't give people the right information to make their own decisions, basically, and people who lie to teenagers on a regular basis
Yeah.
about their sexuality. So anyway, so I did get a lot of pushback for that. For this film, it's kind of interesting. I did get some articles that were accusing me of wanting the population to die out and things like that, and it's like, did you watch the film?
It's like
However,
tell those people to worry about the white rhino right now and then worry about the people when there's like six of us left.
it's the same. Like it's the same people.
Yeah.
Always.
Same
But
people with tusks around their neck. Like
don't know. So I got some of that, which is really expected. The one thing I didn't quite understand making it is how controversial the film is to a lot of people, I have had a hard time getting it into universities.
Interesting.
Not all universities, but some
Right.
universities, they're like,
Brigham
oh,
Young's probably not going to be stocking it on the shelves anytime soon.
you know what though? The library in Utah, and I think maybe even Brigham Young has my virginity documentary.
Oh, there you
So
go. What do I know?
like there's uneasiness about it, about teaching with it, for example. Sometimes it's been really, really interesting. And then, that's one way to show your film is to have people either buy the film or rent it or book me to speak at a university. That's a nice revenue stream in a
Yeah.
business that doesn't have a lot of nice revenue streams, but also corporate stuff. Like I had, somebody from a very, very large company get in touch with me because they wanted to do an event to show my so-called selfish life to their employee resource groups, which is like the women's group, the LGBTQ group, the Black employees group. There's all these different groups that these big companies have.
Yep.
And so we had a really great meeting and we're talking, and then I send a screener. I'm like, okay, here's a screener, have a look, so And in the space between I sent the screener and I heard back from them, which was less than a week, Roe v. Wade was overturned. That's what happened in between. And they wrote me back this very sort of formal letter saying, in light of some current legal decisions, we're going to put a pause on showing your film. And it's like, oh, and then if you have any questions, get back to us.
Right.
And so I wrote back and I said, hi,
Yeah,
I do have a question. What was it exactly that made you want to put a pause on it? This is very helpful for our own distribution and outreach to understand, why certain people, just change their mind like that. Because I never heard back from them, which is not terribly surprising. I was looking for sponsors.
If you have any questions, we'll be ignoring your email.
Yeah. Right. So that, so a couple times that kind of stuff happened a little bit. I couldn't get sponsors for something. We were doing a really big event and I was trying to get some sponsorships from companies. And, I did reach out to all the pregnancy test companies and contraception companies and women's wellness and all of that. And no.
Yeah.
They didn't want to be involved with it. And one person said, well, we sell to women who want children. So it doesn't really make sense for us to.
I love all these people that get mad about cancel culture and then stuff like this they're totally okay with. They're just like, oh yeah, those ideas don't need to be out there. We're just going to fight at every corner so that no teacher feels safe talking, using a pronoun. But yeah, but cancel culture, no, that's bad.
Well, you know what? I think
Bill Cosby for president.
They didn't want their company associated with a film that questioned whether we all needed to have children, and talked about reproductive freedom and things like that. And again, I'm generalizing because some companies just aren't in a position to sponsor a film. Like there's nothing sinister about it at all.
Or there's very little in it for them. And, it's like,
Yeah. So I did get some interest from companies that I did not want to be associated with, who shall remain nameless. So that didn't happen.
Well, is there any way you can talk around that a little bit without saying who it is? Like, because I'm curious what their motivations would have been.
I think people who were a little, how can I even describe this? People who were dealing with things that I didn't think were scientifically accurate, for example. Okay. Just as an example. So I didn't want to be associated with companies that were, selling products based on no science.
Right. Because you see all the time, like, oh, so-and-so did a speech for these people, which means that they were on Epstein's plane. You're like, wait a minute, what? Like, how do we make that jump?
Right. Yeah, because it goes both ways. Like our film is meticulously researched,
Yes.
And so I don't really want to be associated with people who do not meticulously research their stuff. So yeah, it goes both ways. But anyway, so things like that were surprising to me, actually. And the more and more, more and more we were in distribution and stuff, yeah, more and more I heard about stuff like that. Like, well,
Yeah.
your film's very controversial. And I'm like, is it? Oh, is it really?
There's
Okay.
one thing I've learned the past few years. I've learned this working in retail when I was younger and then making art and stuff is that the general public is a crapshoot. You never know. Like when you're working at a store, you never know what the next person is coming going to be. And when you're posting your stuff, you never know. It's like you get perspectives that come out of the woodwork and you're like, wait a minute, is there more than a half a person who feels this way in the whole world? Or am I just crazy?
I mean, yeah, I don't know. But, again, going back to our core audience, building up that core audience, which is huge. I think the latest research from Pew is like 44% of adults of childbearing age probably won't have children in the
Wait,
US.
wow, it's that high. I didn't realize that.
That's what they report. They say they may not or will or definitely won't have children.
Oh,
These things can change, obviously, but
obvious. Yeah,
it's a big number. It's a really
that
big
is a
number.
big number.
And
Right.
so, there are a lot of people who are interested in this film depicting their lives with full humanity. That, is great. It's great for us getting the film out. And we've gotten really great feedback from parents. Also, we have a lot of parents who have been really working to get the word out and sending us nice notes and doing Instagram stories and things like that. So that's all been great. But that's why it really helps to know who your audience is, and that's where you start. And then we've branched out. I mean, I've done stuff for repro rights groups, and I've done stuff for some climate change population groups, but not all of them, only the ones that I feel like
Yeah.
are aligned
They can
with
be a
me.
little hit and miss too.
Well, not, I'm really careful about who I work with because I don't agree with everybody in the world about these things. And
Yeah.
so,
And details matter. And a lot of times the details get lost in this stuff.
yeah, I mean, they do. And, part of that is like, there are a lot of people who identify as anti-natalist, which, are you familiar with that
I'm
term?
kind of putting together in my head now what I think it means. Does that mean intentionally not having, like, letting the population die off or?
Well, there's a lot of like sort of different like groups, but antinatalists, speaking very generally again, is a philosophy that believes that people should just stop having children, that no one should have children for reasons around environment, population, and other, and that to live is to suffer, and babies don't consent to be born. I mean, there's a lot. It covers a lot
I
of
mean,
ground.
this planet we're sitting on will survive longer if that happens. I guarantee you, because it feels like we're on our way to blowing it up ourselves.
This
You
is
know?
possible, yeah. But
Yeah.
so that's and there's a group of antinatalists that are part of the voluntary human extinction movement, which also say we should voluntarily just not have kids, like stop having kids, so humanity can die out. So I'm not an antinatalist, and my film does not have an antinatalist point of view. It just doesn't. It's not. I don't believe in these prescriptive things. Like I think pronatalism is bad, making people have children, and I think antinatalism is also bad because now you're trying to make people not have children,
Right.
right?
And I
So
think you made the right choice because I was thinking too, like a lot of documentaries like yours will take the time out to really look at those people at like the total extremes. And I don't know that it really adds anything. I don't think that having that voice in your film would really add much. I think you made the right choice as you did.
I think that like now, because the film's been out for two and a half years, is that right? Yeah, 2.5 years. So it's been out for a while, and showing it to audiences, I'm always learning stuff, and so I think it's good. We can have those conversations in the Q&As,
Mhm.
about like sort of antinatalism, but the more I think about it, the more I feel like because antinatalists are just basically do not have children, I just don't think that that's helpful to, again,
Right.
be telling people what to do. And antinatalists, you may not agree with how I'm describing you, so I apologize. I'm generalizing. I mean, I think that if we want to talk about population, and too many people on the planet and climate change and all these things, I think you have to talk about it through a framework of like reproductive justice and reproductive freedom. Because if people have the tools and they have the freedom and they have a life that is not full of stigma and shame or coercion, they will have less children. I believe that.
Yeah.
That means giving people the tools and letting them decide. Because even in regions of the world where contraception is available, there's a lot of social pressure to have children, and women are valued for how many children they can produce. So they can't take the contraception, or they may be harmed, for example. So like there's a lot there to unpack, but I think that if people could just make those decisions for themselves, we would have less population growth. You know, the population is growing by like, what is it, 80 million people a year? Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know.
I thought one of the stories that I really connected with in your documentary, and I wish I could remember the young woman's name, but who was trying to get the hysterectomy at a fairly young age, like maybe 20, 21, and she eventually was able to successfully do it, and it was a pretty simple procedure by her accounts. But what she went through is she had so many people that were doctors or other people in her situation that were saying, you're going to want to have kids someday, you're going to question this. And it made me wonder how like it's so easy to get a nose job, it's so easy to change your body in all these other ways, and no one's ever questioning that. But with this decision, and that just seems like an utter disservice of our healthcare system,
Yeah, this is Lauren. She was 19
Yes.
when I met her and was filming her, but she had already been trying to get her tubes tied, actually, not a hysterectomy, but trying to get her tubes tied for a while, and putting together this dossier, and had been turned down by a lot of doctors who basically said, you're too young, you don't know what you want, you're going to want children one day. Or the even worse one, which I don't know if anyone said it to her, but what if your husband wants children? And it's like, then they're not going to be my husband.
Oof,
So,
magoof. Can you imagine having those words coming out of your mouth, like, and just not feeling shameful afterwards? I just can't get that.
It really falls apart on any kind of close examination.
Yeah.
But yeah, she said that too. She said, I could sign up for like a huge mortgage, or move to China, or join the military.
Right. Take out a student loan, like
whatever. And she's considered an adult, but in this one thing, she's not respected as an adult.
Yeah.
I think again, it just goes back to pronatalism, which is this idea that everyone should have children. All women naturally want children. Not true. All women, that is what will really make women happy, because that's why we're on the earth, is to make children. And that is our destiny. All of these ideas that are just wrapped up in ideas that aren't true anymore as a blanket statement about, they've never been true, but they're not true as a blanket statement about what women want and what will make us happy, and any of that. But that's
these are strange. Oh, go for it.
No, go ahead.
One thing, this isn't like maybe directly related to what's talked about in your film, but it's something that I thought about a lot while I was watching it. I noticed this is a phenomenon that I've seen over the past many years in social media, is you see people who only post pictures of their kids and none of themselves. And it's like you go to their profile page, their profile picture is just the kids, and every picture is just the kids. And I look at this and I'm like, I try to break this down psychologically. I'm like, it's almost like they're using their kids as a shield to block anybody from seeing them. But it just seems like why do people do this? It seems insane. There's something tied up with your identity with your children in there. I don't know what it is. But.
Right. Although I will say that just today I was looking at an Instagram account where the person, for the most part, posted pictures of bikes and espresso machines.
I like that too. These are only certain people that I'm talking about, where I just think these certain people, I'm just like, what is going on with you?
I mean, they're excited about their kids. They want to
I
share,
guess. I
and
just, to me, it feels like maybe I feel like that if I had kids, I'd be super protective and wouldn't want pictures out there. And when I
yeah,
see people that seem to treat that themselves that way, but not their kids, it's just for my brain starts cranking about what's the logic behind that, you know?
that's really always my question is why do you want to put pictures of your kids all over the internet? It seems
Yeah.
like maybe not the best choice, but you know, um, that's what they choose. And then the guy with the espresso machines and bikes, you know,
Yeah.
why are you putting
Content.
only bikes and espresso machines?
I don't know,
Although
but every time I play a record on my record player, I take a picture. I post a video to my Instagram, so I can only say so much.
okay, yeah, so you don't really have a good case then.
No, no, no.
Like
Got to be creating
out here.
content, getting those engagements. Got people come back. I
Yeah.
don't know. I have to say, speaking of music, Miss Eves really blew me away, and she may be hearing from me at some point about possibly collaborating on a song because I really loved her. Such a cool person, very talented, just lots of great stuff to say. What was the? How did you find her?
So Missy Eves is the stage name, I guess, of a
Yes.
woman named Shanthony Exum, who's really an amazing multimedia artist. I was introduced to her through a mutual friend who said, knowing I'm making this film, they said, I think you should talk to her. I think she'd be a really interesting subject. Um, and I can introduce you, if you want. And so that's kind of how it started. It was really through somebody else who thought it would be a good fit. And happily, she also thought that, and she wanted to be in the film. And she's so great on camera, and she's so talented. And
Yeah, she pops right off the screen.
yeah, well,
I'm sure with the delight once you met her, you're like, oh yeah, perfect.
she's a superstar, honestly,
Yeah.
and multi-talented. And yeah, and we got to do show clips of her music videos, and also used one of her songs over the end credits. So that was really great. It was really great working with her. And yeah, so her I don't know how much, I don't know if she's making a lot of music right now, to be honest. I think
Yeah,
she's
she
just,
seems like she does a lot of she's obviously multi-talented and just,
she is.
goes to show you what you can achieve when you're not raising kids. It's like, I mean, there's a bit of that too with me because like I make films, I make hip hop, I do drawings, I stuff, and you realize that like you can get good at a lot of stuff without having kids around. Like it's,
Well,
you know,
I mean, you have more time. Having children
yeah,
is an all-consuming thing, and it makes a lot of people really happy and feel really fulfilled and brings them a lot of joy. And it's worth it, but it is an all-consuming thing. It really does take over your life, and the responsibility of raising a human, is
yeah.
massive, massive. So yes, I mean, those of us who don't have kids, some people have a lot of free time. I don't have a lot of free time, but
Yeah, I fill it up, but
yeah, it's full. But I'm not taking trips to, Italy and rolling around in dollar bills on my yacht and things like
right.
that, which is how a lot of times we're portrayed.
I know.
I'm making documentaries, I volunteer, I do a bunch of stuff. Um, but yeah, of course, there's time for other things if you're not raising kids, because raising kids takes a lot of time and is probably, the biggest responsibility that a person would have is
Yeah.
taking care of a kid and making sure they don't, fall into a hole
Yeah.
or something.
Um, I did really appreciate the quick Roddy Piper clip from They Live in your movie, which is like, I'm a huge wrestling fan. That's one of my favorite movies of all time. And I was just like, yes. I loved it. I was like, awesome.
There's a lot of pop culture in the film. People are always saying, "Oh, I'm so glad you put X into the film," because there's a lot of stuff. But
So
that
what is
they
that
live.
process like though? Oh, yeah, sorry. No, no.
No, go ahead.
What is the process like to try to get something like, They Live, for those who don't know, it's a John Carpenter film from the 80s that's been, if you haven't seen it, you've seen everything that's parodied it from The Simpsons to Shep Ferry. It's been parodied a zillion times. But like, so what's it like to try to, from like a business perspective, to try to get a clip like that for your film when obviously you're trying to keep things low budget?
Right. Well, that's a really interesting question. So actually finding the clip isn't that hard. You can, rip a DVD or
Yeah.
whatever to have it. There are all kinds of copyright laws. So that's really important. There is also, though, the doctrine of fair use, which is, it's not a law, but it's called a doctrine. It allows educators, filmmakers, writers to use certain things if they're being used for educational purposes, commentary, satire, sometimes.
Right.
That
Similar to parody laws, but like not
sort
about
of,
the, yeah, but that's
yeah,
in
sort. I mean,
ballpark.
it gives you, someone can still sue you, of course, but it does allow you to do it, and every single little clip has to be weighed on whether it fulfills the requirements of fair use, because there's no like it can only be 10 seconds long, or
Yeah.
it must be like this or that. Every single thing you have to like legally look at and say, does this come under fair use or does it not come under fair use? But it is a way for filmmakers like me to be educating people on complex ideas through things like pop culture, which is, a great way to help people understand things.
Right.
And in They Live, it's the scene where he puts on his glasses, and it's a big sort of billboard of a woman in a bikini. It's some tropical travel ad, and he puts on his glasses, and what it really says is get married and reproduce.
Yeah.
That's the thing. So that's a really great way to talk about prenatalism, for example. So you have to work with a lawyer, and you have to document every single clip, every image that you want to use that is under copyright. That's not in the public domain, which means it's available to use, or that's not been created by the government, which is also public domain stuff, or Creative Commons, which has its own rules, but not that strict. Yeah, so you have to document everything. We had like at least 200 separate things in the film.
Yeah, because it seemed like a lot. And I have to point out, calling Jennifer Aniston the mother of all non-mothers, that really popped to me. I thought that was brilliant. Whoever came up with that, I was like, oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah, that's Ann Kingston, the person that I was interviewing, that's
Oh,
her
okay.
phrase. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought that was great.
So a lawyer reviews it, they write a long report on it, and then most broadcasters will not. You have to get something called, this is really inside baseball now, but you have to get something called errors and omissions insurance, which is insurance if somebody sues you for something in your film.
Oh, that's interesting.
So your film gets insured against, like if you make a mistake and somebody wants to sue you, or for whatever reason, people will come in and want to sue you. So you can't get errors and omissions insurance in a film full of fair use stuff until the lawyer has written a convincing long report on it. And once you have the errors and omissions insurance, then a broadcaster or a distributor, et cetera, will work with you, but they won't work with you otherwise because they don't want that problem.
That is one of the big pains of stuff like making films that people don't think about. Because like if I make a music video and I wear like this Echo sweatshirt, I'm probably gonna have to blur that out because who knows? It's like I know Major League Baseball is really big about their insignias, as I'm wearing a blank hat here. So anybody who wants to pay to put their logo on my hat, just let me know. But that is a big pain about making films, is that there are all those little things you have to sort of button up, and it's
right. But by the same token, though, we all want our copyright respected, right? So as a creator myself, I want my copyright respected. So I don't want someone to take my film and put it up on YouTube, right?
Yeah.
Well,
speaking of which, what are your distribution? I mean, you said the movie's been out for 2.5 years. Like, what distribution channels is it currently available for? And is there any? Are you still working to try to get it on more, or like? How's that been?
That was our festival premiere, was 2.5 years ago. Our digital premiere which was the first time regular non-festival audiences could see it, was in May. So that's about 2 years ago. Yeah. We've done several things. It is available for educational sales and rentals. So to schools, libraries, also conferences, museums, I mean, things like that. Nonprofits, of course. So it's available. People can rent or purchase the film through our distributor for that. I have an international distributor who is selling the film in different markets around the world. So that's also ongoing. We've already been in Spain, we've been in Greece, we've been in Belgium, we've been in Taiwan.
Well, that's it. So how was the reaction like in different, because I'm sure this is a topic that's viewed very differently in different cultures. Have you felt that in the response?
It's hard for me to get the response because
Yeah.
sometimes I don't even know when it's going to air. Like I know that we've sold it, but I don't know when it's going to air exactly. And then I would have to have access to media. If I've got like a Google search on the name of the film or my name, sometimes it will pop up, but it's very hard to get Google search results in other countries in other languages.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So,
Every once in a while, somebody will Shazam one of my songs in like South Africa, and I'm like, I want to know everything about this interaction that just happened, and I can get nothing except for the fact that it happened. It's so frustrating.
yeah, it's really hard because it's really got nothing to do with me at that point. My distributor sold it to a broadcaster in Taiwan, for example. Now, those broadcasters initially contacted me, so they had heard about the film and were interested in seeing, a screener. So I passed that over to the distributors and then they sold it to Taiwan. But yeah, I don't know. I don't really know. I don't know what the response was. Sometimes I do hear back. Sometimes if I have a closer relationship with the broadcaster, I can find out. Sometimes people just email me or tweet at me actually who have seen the film, which is always like the best.
Yeah,
So when it was on in Spain, I got a bunch of emails and tweets and things from people who had seen the film.
that's cool.
Yeah.
I mean, how's your mom doing? I think she was a very fun part of the movie.
Mhm.
She gave some great interviews, some great insights, and told a beautiful story about why you're here.
Yep.
So how was the decision in bringing her into it? And did she feel, was it something that she was enthusiastic about, and how did she feel about it once it was done?
Yeah, my mother is the like breakout star of this film because I have a couple conversations with her in the film about different things, and she's great. She's really articulate. She's really provocative, I think, in some of her opinions. She's just lovely. She's a lovely person, as is my father. He just doesn't end up in my films, but I have very lovely parents. I asked her to do it because there were certain things that we had talked about when about whether or not I would have children, about like the idea of Mother's Day, things like that, that I really wanted to share with the world. I wanted to share her viewpoints on certain things with the world. So she said, okay. She's not a very self promoting person. So it's not in her character to say, yeah, I'd love to be in a film. But she did because she said, because I'm her daughter and she wanted to help me. So
Wow.
it was very sweet. And, she's still sort of like, she's happy with it. I showed her everything I wanted to use and it was okay with her and everything. She loves the film. I think she's still somewhat like uncomfortable with the idea that people all over the world are listening to her talk
Yeah.
about stuff. But just because she's a sort of like a humble person and, it isn't something she would seek out, but she is the person in the film far, far beyond everyone else that people talk to me about.
Yeah.
They just love her and love what she says, and it's really.
And you also, because the film's essentially about you as well, obviously it's about, I know a lot of people, but it's about you. And so the connection with you and her it's really powerful, and it's great. It's heartwarming, and you kind of see where you came from through the lens of her. And that's a really, really nice moment as well.
Yeah, it's nice.
You know,
One thing I didn't mention in terms of distribution is that right now the film is available for rental, for home video rental. For $10, you can go and rent the film and watch it.
and I
Basically,
highly recommend people check it out. It's funny. This morning when I emailed you, I was trying to find the right word. I think the word I used was beautiful. That was the one I settled on. But I'm like, what is the word you use to describe this film? Because it's like, I mean, what is that? I was trying to think of how I describe it because it's beautifully made. It tells a really great story. It brings a lot of It's like I don't even know what the word is. I mean, excellent, I guess, is maybe it. But thought provoking. It's all
A
those
work of
things.
genius.
The work of genius. I'll go with that. Yeah, I like that. So what was you mentioned the film about virginity? What was your other documentary?
So my first feature documentary was called I Was a Teenage Feminist.
Oh,
And
cool.
that was the most personal because it was me trying to grapple with where I was in my life at that time. Like I wasn't married. I didn't have kids. I didn't look like a supermodel. I felt like I had done everything right in my little feminist world. And I wasn't really happy, but I didn't quite know why.
Mm.
And so the film was sort of a journey to figure out what it means to be a feminist in the 21st century, and sort of trying to reconnect to this thing that when I was 13 years old really changed me and made me sort of the person I am today, learning about women's rights and busting a lot of myths about how girls and women are supposed to behave and what's supposed to make them happy and what they're supposed to be doing. And it really opened up the world to me when I was 13. But by the time I was in my late 30s, it was like I just feel completely insecure in this world, like I've just failed,
Right.
and how do I reconnect to that feeling of power I had when I was 13?
It sounds so
So
easy when Kathleen Hanna is screaming it from like a bikini kill stage, but like when the rubber hits the road and it's a day-to-day thing, it's like, yeah, I can see that.
yeah. Well, actually, that film, I did film with a whole bunch of like Riot Girl type folks, not Kathleen Hanna, not that
Yeah.
famous, but I was hanging out with a whole bunch of women and one producer of that music. She's in the film and she talks about it, and we have a couple of musicians in the film also, because I
That's
was trying
awesome.
to find out where does feminism exist now and what does it look like. And this was at a time where people were not yet calling themselves feminists again. So a lot of people were like, why are you making this film? Nobody cares about feminism, kind of thing. Like nobody wants to hear that.
Well, about half the world does. You know.
Yeah. So that's that film. That was my very first film I ever made, aside from film school films.
Where
Yeah.
do you go to film school?
I went to film school as an adult. I was living and working in Chicago. So I went to Columbia College and went into their film program part-time. And I did that for a few years part-time. I was working at
I
the
went
Chicago Tribune newspaper.
I went to BU for film like in the late 90s. I was the last class that had to we had to use real film and
Oh
physically
yeah.
cut it and scotch tape it together. And the next year
Yep.
it's like, hey, here's the Avid. I'm like, wow, that was fun all the money I got to spend on.
Yeah, I did too. I only shot on film. I shot on 16 millimeter film in school, never video.
Yeah.
And we were cutting things with razor blades.
Right. And you had no idea, like it's like you shot something 3 weeks later, you find out how it looks, and that's gonna be your grade if something's underexposed. It's just that didn't set me
Yeah,
up for the real world.
that was insane, honestly. I did start learning to use the Avid while I was in school, but not in school. It's because I was working with an editor and she,
Yeah.
I was sort of training with her, I guess, and learning it. Um, but then I was a teenage feminist is video, and I didn't know how to use a video camera. So I was sort of learning as I went along. My mother is also in that film, actually.
Oh, I'm definitely is that in the virginity film both available? Like if I were to go try and track
The
them down?
virginity film, yes, is available to rent. I was a teenage feminist is not right now unless you have Canopy. They're both available on Canopy, which is connected to your public library.
Yep. That's a great resource for people too. A lot of people don't know about Canopy, but it's a really
Yeah.
great resource to get access to a lot of media that you can't get otherwise. You can get for free. It's a great resource.
Yes, you can get it for free. So if Canopy in your area, if you have a library card in Canopy, and they're carrying those two films, because not everyone has Canopy, they should be on there for free. Yeah.
Okay. So
So
you can
that's the
track
best
those
way to
down.
find them. But if not, then you can just go to my website, which is trixiefilms.com, and it will lead you to some other places where you can watch it.
And are you working on another film now?
I just started another film, which I'm not going to talk about too much, but it's sort of a continuation of this series of films I've been doing,
It's
sort of
awesome.
on a similar theme.
How
And
when
really
you're
early.
looking at a film now, or at the start of this film, do you have an idea now, without giving too much away, of how long it will take, or and now that you've done three of these, like what have you learned that you apply forward, or is there a certain degree of that everyone is different?
Yeah, they're all sort of different.
Yeah.
I mean, in terms of the timing, again, it is so dependent on fundraising. So if I get like a broadcast deal up front, I'll have to have it done in 2 years, for example. If I'm doing it independently, I can take all the time I want, but I don't want to take all the time. I want to get it done as quickly as possible. But like my first film took 4 years because a broadcaster came in near the end, and that really accelerated everything. How to Lose Your Virginity took almost 8 years to make. There were long breaks where I wasn't working on it at all. And
You could
then
lose a lot of virginity in 8 years.
I know, I'll think of the virgins. Um,
Yes.
my so-called selfish life took about 5 years, and that was slowed down because of the pandemic. So it probably would have been done in 4 years also. But the
So out of
pandemic,
curiosity, this is one thing that's interesting with me, that over time, the things that you spend money on when you're making a film kind of change. Like the thing, like I said before, we used to have to spend a lot of money on film, and that was most of the budget for an independent filmmaker.
yeah.
Clerks was made for 30 grand by Kevin Smith in the early 90s, and most of that was spent on processing film and maybe some renting some equipment. So when you're talking about raising money, what is that really going to as part of the production?
A lot of it is going to pay other people, honestly.
Like
So
lawyers and
well, the cinematographers, for
yeah.
example, right? So paying cinematographers, because I can shoot stuff, but I should not really be shooting
Right.
my
And this
film.
film is very well shot too. You can do that, money went somewhere well, because like a lot of documentaries, you can shoot one on an iPhone, doesn't mean that you should, but your
Yeah.
film is very well shot and well
Yeah, I worked
edited.
with wonderful cinematographers. I interviewed people all over North America, so there's travel costs. There's editing. Editing is a huge expense because you're working with someone for a really long time. And your editor is, I think, the most important partner you're going to have in
Yep.
making a film. Excuse me. So a lot of it goes towards editing, but also the assistant editor who's going to log in all your stuff and organize it, and researcher who's going to help find all those cool pop culture things. I never get paid. I haven't been paid a penny for any of this work. It all goes to mostly other people. But then, lawyers, like there's a bunch of lawyers' fees for a whole bunch of different things. Animator, I worked with an amazing animator, composer who did the score. I mean, I think those are the biggest expenses, is paying people to do wonderful work, paying
Yeah.
talented people. Some people do everything themselves. I'm not at all that person. So
Yeah.
I look for really great people to collaborate with.
Well, the money's on the screen because it looks really great. It's beautiful. It's like well shot, well laid out. And I think it tells a really, like, the narrative, it keeps you entertained and informed the whole time, which is a really tricky thing to do. And like it doesn't go into preachy territory. I feel like it goes out of its way not to do that. Like it reminds me, I mentioned Kevin Smith before, when his film Dogma was coming out, people were protesting it before they even saw it. And then when it came out, it was like a giant like fecal monster just like in a rubber suit. And like, why, who's mad about this? And it's like the idea that your film could be controversial, you gotta really be looking for something to be mad about. I guess people that are mad about people having personal freedom is probably, you know.
I would meet people at parties and they would say, "Are you working on a film?" And I'd say, "Yeah, what are you working on?" And I would say, "It's about a film about people who choose not to have children." And then there would be like silence. Silence. They wouldn't
Yeah.
really know what to say about that. That happened a lot. the other thing that would happen is somebody would say, "Oh my God, someone's making a film about this. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you." But a lot of it, I was just greeted with silence because people had no idea what to say about it.
That's what I've come to call. I know the situation you're talking about. I call the my friend told me this when we were teenagers that she got a nose ring, and she's like, when you have a nose ring, this is years ago. So you have two reactions: either it's great or they say nothing. And it's like, and that's something that I've realized there's so many things like that in life where it's like, as I've gotten older, I've realized just how much projecting people do. Like so much of the people that are saying, oh, we don't want like, non-binary and trans people indoctrinating our kids. It's like, well, you're the ones dunking their head in water when they're two and like starting them off on this journey of soul. It's like, the indoctrinate, like it's like, but I've come to realize how much of this is projecting, and it's like you can tell when people give those responses, they tell you way more about themselves than they do about you, and it's something I think a lot of people are missing.
Yeah.
Self-awareness could save the world.
I mean, I feel like there are people who are really uncomfortable with that idea, of like either they didn't know they had a choice, or they maybe made a choice and they're not so happy about it, or they're jealous because I have more free time than they do. I mean, there's a lot of things, or it's just a confusing concept they've never heard before.
Yeah.
That's also part. I hear from people all the time saying, "Oh, I didn't know I didn't have to have kids."
See, I have this very strong memory of my mother saying to me as a kid, she's like, you should think very long and hard about having kids. And I wasn't like a bad kid, like I was pretty easy, but like I'm still thinking very long and hard about it. So it's,
Yeah. I think everyone should think long and hard about it. And whatever decision you come to, with my blessings, like
yeah,
live the life you want to live. That's if you can.
yeah,
But I do think we should think about these things. Like I said, bringing a new human into the world, like that's kind of a big responsibility, and you don't want to do it just because your aunt was bugging you about it at
right.
Thanksgiving,
The
or
selfish
even.
aspect of it's interesting, just because
Mhm.
like, it could be just as selfish that so many people are like, well, who's going to take care of you when you're older? You're like, well, this is all we're doing here. It's like,
Oh my God, talk about being selfish. I mean,
it's like if you imagine, there's a lot of people. I mean, this is probably a bad thing to say, but if you said to a lot of people with kids and they're older, would you rather have the kids that you have now taking care of you, or all the money you spent on those kids that was invested? Like right now, if you had to pick between the two for the rest of your life, not everybody's going to pick the kid.
no, I mean, you know, life is a series of choices, right?
Mhm.
And you don't always make the right choice. Even if you think about it long and hard, you may not always make the right
Right.
choice. So, our lives are just like that. And every time you make a choice, there's something you didn't choose, of the
Yeah.
road not taken. Life's
Yeah.
complicated, I guess is all
Yeah.
I can say. So I
And the efforts to
really,
control it at that high level aren't going to work, because
that's also.
the tree grows the way the tree grows, not, you can plant
Mhm.
100 seeds in the same thing. They're not all going to grow straight up.
Yeah, I'm really, if nothing else, I really want people to be aware of the kind of manipulation that is happening, and the kind of control that people are trying to exert on our lives, and what that means.
It's
That's
wild.
really important.
That's one thing I think we're learning is that like now we're really experiments. Like no other, time as human being would put under the microscope like we are now. And we're really realizing that it's not that hard to control large swaths of people under certain
Mhm.
circumstances. And it's scary.
It is,
It's,
yeah.
especially when those people are well organized.
Yeah, and well
So
funded.
yeah, I know. I guess when you're not doing any of the things that life has to offer, you have a lot of time to control others, but whatever. That's a
Yeah,
story for another day.
yeah.
But
I would make my films a lot faster if I was doing stuff about how women should be submissive to their husbands.
I know.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny. I was watching the 50 Shades of Grey movies the past few weeks for this podcast that I listened to, and like I had never seen those movies before, and I didn't know what I was watching. Just in terms of like, wait a minute, like all I kept thinking about is I'm like, if this guy wasn't rich, does this story hold together at all? Like it's like he's just treating her horribly.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't actually understand the 50 Shades of Grey series, but a lot of people love it. So
Yeah. I would say it must go into the guilty pleasure category because I don't think artistically they really hold up to, much scrutiny. But, everybody likes their guilty pleasures. It's like I got a wall full of them behind me.
yeah,
I'll
that's
defend
right.
Twin Peaks to the death.
Yeah. Sorry, my phone keeps dinging, which means that my hour-long do not disturb has ended.
Okay, that's good. We probably should wrap this up anyway because I feel like I'm already taking up too much. I could talk to you forever. I mean, you're a
This is
delightful
really
human
fun.
being. You
Thank
make
you.
awesome movies. I can't wait to watch the other ones. So I highly recommend everybody go out and check out My So-Called Selfish Life.
Yeah.
I got that right? My
myselfishlife.com.
so-called, yes, my so-called selfish, yep, .com. And yeah, and check out your films, Canopy, wherever you can. You'll rent them online. So any parting
Just
thoughts for us?
go to our website. Go to our website. There's lots of goodies there, including a comic, an online
Ooh, very
comic.
cool. Awesome.
So, and there's a link right at the top of the homepage to do a home video rental and info on how to get the film for your group or your school or whatever, or just say hi.
Awesome.
Or
Yeah,
get on our
I
mailing
highly
list
recommend it.
also.
Cool.
Yeah.
Very good. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Teresa. I mean, it's been awesome.
Thank you. It was really my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
No problem.